happy. And then it repeats. And it will make another digital nomad.
All right, guys, it's 6:03 from beautiful Bali in Ubud. We're at the co-working space Ubud, and it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, which means it's time for Bitcoin Filter. We do this every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. So if you ever visit Bali, I hope you'll join us in person for the show. We've got a really good show tonight. Lots of things on tap in the next hour. We've got some big local announcements. So we'll do that at the top. We're going to talk about the price, and we've got a 25% price rise in the last week. Very exciting. It's more exciting to talk about it when it goes up than when it goes down for some reason. We've got the Bitcoin number of the week with Will's segment. We've got the Bitcoin news items that we've talked about over the week. Just for those who are uninitiated, we talk about Bitcoin at this Facebook group. Facebook, oh, I'm sorry, that's got the events. That's the wrong URL. But anyway, on Facebook, look for the Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. This is an ongoing discussion that we have most of the time online, and then we do it in person on Tuesday nights where we can actually interact with one another and argue, etc. But it's a lot of fun. It happens online most of the time here, and then when we get together on Tuesday nights, we discuss everything. So we're going to talk about the news items that people have been posting on Bitcoins in Bali. And the name of tonight's show is Bitcoin Force of Nature. And the reason we called it that is because Bitcoin is starting to be used, or the Bitcoin technology is starting to be used for other things besides money. The blockchain technology is an invention that has a lot of applications. A lot of people don't realize that it's good for other things besides just money. And we're going to talk about some of those things on the latter part of the show. So let's kick it off. I'm going to share my screen here. Bear with me. That should be the correct screen. People don't have to look at my ugly mug anymore. They can see the screen that we're talking about. Again, for those of you who don't know, this is the Bitcoins in Bali group. Facebook.com/group/Bitcoins in Bali. That's where we do our offline or our online discussion. Okay, local announcements. I've got a few of them. The Bitcoin 101. We did a Bitcoin 101 in English this past Saturday. People came with rupiah and left with Bitcoin. People showed up not knowing anything about Bitcoin and left with a little bit of Bitcoin knowledge. We're doing this every second Saturday here at Ubud. So tell your friends, if you're already a Bitcoin person and your friends are not, perhaps you can ask them to join us. We're doing this every second Saturday here at Ubud. And it's a good way to get your feet wet. You walk in with no Bitcoins, you leave with a little bit of Bitcoins, and you know how to use them safely. The cool thing about this coming Saturday is we're going to offer Bitcoin 101 in Bahasa, Indonesia. This beautiful girl here is Vinny, and she speaks Indonesian way better than I do. And she happens to know a lot about Bitcoin as well after all this time. So Saturday, here in this room, Bitcoin 101 in Bahasa, Indonesia. So we're trying to do community outreach. If you've got friends that don't speak English very well but are interested in Bitcoin, then have them come join. It's a free class, and we'll let them know everything they need to know. So really excited about that. And in other news, local merchant Kismet now accepts Bitcoin. And I'm going to suggest for those of you who are interested, we're going to go to Kismet after the meeting tonight for a little Asian fusion, and we can pay with Bitcoin when we go. You can get a little experience, or at least see somebody pay their bill in Bitcoin. That's always very exciting.
Peter's going to be excited.
And yeah, Peter, I think, planted the seed there way back when. Peter is one of the people that spent some time with us here in Ubud getting things started. He's South African, though. He's back in South Africa. Might even be listening tonight. Hello, Peter, if you are. And I'm sure he'll be eating his heart out because we'll be having fun at Kismet. He's stuck in South Africa. But yeah, that's always exciting when a new merchant joins up. we've got a lot going on in Bali. You can see this is Indonesia. That's Jawa. Here's Bali. We've got 21 merchants in Bali that accept Bitcoin, compared to 7 in Jakarta. So, and Jakarta is a much bigger place. So we're really turning this into a Bitcoin island, if you will. We really want to make it a place where people recognize that they can come here and it's a Bitcoin friendly place. That's really what we're working on. So,
can I add on?
Sure.
Actually, Swasti just add another 3 and 5 more merchant, but we haven't updated.
Ah, really?
People can,
That's great.
Yeah. Now people can writing surfing.
Yeah, surfing and anything else you can mention? Souvenirs. Yeah, down in the Kuta area, down where you're. Legian.
Yes.
Ah,
Swasti
excellent.
is very good Bitcoiners.
That's cool. No, that's cool. That's great. Well, you know, if we can get this number to 100, it will turn red, and it will rival. It'll be one of the biggest places in the region. You see, there's 41 in Singapore.
Okay.
You know, even down in Australia, there's some smaller numbers. So if this were to turn red, I mean, it would really stand out on the map. You can see it would. You know, there's lots of red dots up here in Europe. It'd be nice to see one. Yeah, if you conglomerate them around Sydney. But there's a conspicuous absence of red dots in this part of the world. Yeah.
European number.
Yeah, why not?
Be our target together.
Yes, yes. We've still got time.
The chain reaction, the density.
Yes. Anyway, very excited that to hear your news, and that there's more local merchants accepting Bitcoin all over Bali.
3 a week.
Speaking of Bali as a destination for Bitcoiners, this is a startup weekend, which is something that's happening here at Ubud, and it's a way for people to launch their startup in a beautiful environment. Basically, you step out of your own environment, you come to Bali, and in 3 days you can get your startup off the ground. This is sponsored by Google for Entrepreneurs. It happens right here at Ubud, and it's a great event, and it's the kickoff for another event called the Bitcoin Bali Binge, which is a month-long event where we move into this villa, this beautiful villa, which is right out here behind Ubud, where it's kind of like summer camp. Everybody lives in a big house together, and you bring your Bitcoin ideas, your Bitcoin projects. You can get it started with this startup weekend, and then spend the month with other Bitcoiners and their projects, getting your project off the ground. So again, this is right out behind where we're sitting right now. It's a beautiful villa with a pool, excellent Wi-Fi connection, lots of community spaces where developers can collaborate. And we've got about 16 spots. We don't have a lot of lead time. This is happening 1 month from today. So on the 14th of November, that's when the startup weekend begins. And then for the following month, we will live in this villa together and get Bitcoin projects off the ground. We've, like I said, there's 16 spots. I think 4 or 5 are taken already, and we don't even have the website up yet. So stay tuned to Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. As soon as we've got information, we'll post it there. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's it for the local announcements. Let's talk about price. We're up about 25% over last week, you know, we were down around 300 last week. We talked about the Bitcoin bear whale. Some person was selling 30,000 Bitcoins at 300 at a price of $300. He missed out on about 25% of gain. So hundreds of thousands of dollars he missed out on, but I think he'll be all right. I think he'll be all right. You want to say something about that?
Yes, actually, if let's say we try to check the BTC, about these 3 weeks, there is a one person that keep dumping about 1,000 Bitcoin 1 time per day, and that's one of the counts that we calling dropping down until 3.6 this last week.
Do you have any idea what motivates these people to sell their Bitcoins at this low ebb?
I'm not sure yet, but I can imagine many betting and
Many guesses, yes. Yes, who knows? It's an open marketplace and different people have different motivations. Maybe someone has to pay for a surgery or something. Who knows what? Who knows? Maybe they're desperate. Or maybe they know something we don't know. Anyway, it's like every week, it's a good soap opera. It's good spectator sport. It's never dull in the Bitcoin world. Today we're happy because we're up 25%. Hallelujah.
I'm not happy because I didn't buy enough when it was
Yes. Well, we're in the grand scheme of things. I think we're still low. There's still a chance.
Where's it go? Get in there.
So this is dollars. Let's take a look at rupiah. This is the bitcoin.co.id exchange. And we're just under the psychological barrier of 5 million rupiah per Bitcoin. Be happy to see us go over that. And the exchange volume is a little bit higher than normal, which always tends to happen when the price is in flux. But it's all good news. Let's take a look at the BMix score and the total market cap. Last week we were down around $4 billion. This is the value of all Bitcoins in existence versus the dollar. Almost $5 billion all Bitcoins are worth. That ranks it 100th amongst the 190 other currencies on the planet. We're right between Yemen and the Dominican Republic. So we're used to seeing that number right around 89 or 90. But since the price has tumbled recently, we've taken a little dip. But it's always interesting to look at how Bitcoin compares to other fiat currencies around the world.
What does the rupiah fall on that scale?
That's a good question. There's a list of full list of ones here. Let's see if we can find Indonesia. Indonesia is 39th. We got a ways to go.
Yeah.
We got a ways to go. Let's take a look at the 30-day trailing volatility number. Last week we were at 14%, I think 15%. This week we're down to 8%. So there's been a lot of volatility lately, but I think we're back up around a more normal number this week. So the volatility figure for the last 30 days is lower. This is something we've been keeping an eye on for the last month or so. It's a way to gauge if you're a merchant, if you want to get back into fiat currency in order to pay your bills. This is one of the services offered by the bitcoin.co.id exchange, where merchants can immediately exchange their Bitcoins that people spend there back into rupiah so that they can pay their suppliers and they're not subject to this volatility risk. So it's something we keep an eye on. I don't know if you want to say anything about that service.
Yeah, because actually based on the Indonesian regulation, if let's say we like to be properly following the law, actually it's better to always when you are not a restaurant, when you are a hotel, when you have a proper business license, it's always good to always convert your Bitcoin to rupiah. Because in Indonesia there is a regulation that mentioned that the transaction all need to be done in rupiah.
Ah, okay, interesting.
And that's why our system is to have people to lock the price and automatically sell the Bitcoin to rupiah.
Right.
0% fee.
So it's like an instant to rupiah thing, so that keeps them technically inside the regulations.
And we currently upgrade that system to be automatically pushed in the bank.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
interesting.
currently it's a day plus one.
Gotcha. No, good. That's a great service, especially if businesses, don't want to subject themselves to the regulatory risk or the volatility risk. There's a lot of benefits. It's a good service that you offer. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Will for the Bitcoin number of the week. Take it away, Will.
Thanks, Gary. All right, this week, number 70. That's, any guesses on that? It's a nice round number.
Can I just do something?
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That number. All right, here we
And-
go.
We lost the, hold on, folks. There we go.
All right, nice work, Gary.
Sorry.
Okay, this is 70% year-on-year growth in the number of transactions per day in Bitcoin is what I work it out to be. And I worked this out, I wanted to work it out because there was this article earlier in this month by this blog who look at digital payment, electronic payment services. And they were talking about Bitcoin's roller coaster ride to nowhere. And I thought, really? And somewhere down here they're saying, can anyone see? There's, it's just flat. You know, they're saying that the transactions are flat. If you read this, whoop, scroll back up. And then they've got this graph to show how flat it is from blockchain.info. And this is apparently flat. So I went over to blockchain info and pulled up the 2-year. And this is the last year that's been flat. And you notice that they're saying it's flat coming off this crazy December huge price action we had. You might have seen in the last graph where it went from, what was it?
Just $80 or $120.
Yeah, $80 to $1,200. So obviously that's going to stimulate a lot of speculative trading activity. But what we really want to look at is the sort of baseline support, which is the underlying kind of activity that's supporting Bitcoin. And you can see it's a steady growth, and this is in fact a logarithmic graph, so it's showing exponential growth, right? And the article saying until, you can read it, until we see exponential growth in Bitcoin, you know, it's nothing's going to happen. So I went, all right, let's throw this on a graph. And this is the last 2 years. And 2 years is kind of like, 2 years ago, we started to have the first sort of mainstream use in Bitcoin for donations and a few things, outlets were selling under Bitcoin. And I just took a straight line. And bear in mind, we've got like Braintree and PayPal coming online. Is Braintree, is that a rumor or is that a...
Braintree is part of PayPal. It's their...
Oh, that is
their
payments,
the thing, yeah. Mechanism. Yeah.
So they're coming online soon. And I drew the straight line sort of projection. And, you know, you don't want to go to the bottom of it. But I do work out that gradient to be 70%. And I think that's kind of conservative given the kind of activity. And it's a lot of unknowns because it's only 2 years and we're talking about a long game. So let's just flick over to the next sheet and go, let's look at what happens when we grow transactions by 70% year on year. So by 2020, we've got over 1 million. These numbers might not mean much to you, but the number you want to look at for comparison is 178 million, because that's the number of transactions we have in Visa per year. So that spans probably more than all internet transactions and into, you know, mainstream commerce. And so you can see in 15 years, it's going to exceed Visa, you know, bearing in mind it might be just an S spend, so it might slow down. But that kind of gives you an indication. 15 years, they say Bitcoin's sort of like the early 90s of the World Wide Web, you know, early 90s. So sort of puts us around, what, 2008, 2010 of the World Wide Web.
Or 1998, right?
World Wide Web was like 95 it exploded. Right? So yeah. 15 years was like
okay, gotcha.
2010. And then you've got like Facebooks and social media and everything's happening. Things that are being invented on the internet we never thought possible. And maybe it'll take 15 years. Maybe it'll take 15 years. But that's sort of the critical mass we're looking at. Yeah, there you go, 70% year on year.
And those are transactions per day?
Yeah, transactions per day.
Right.
Oh, and wait. Oh, whoa. Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
that's
transactions per day.
Because here we go, transactions per second. Transactions per second for Visa is 2,000. And then multiplied by 24 hours at 3,600 seconds per hour. So yeah, that's Visa.
Wow.
And PayPal 46. So
Right, and we still don't have an answer to the block size peak of 7 transactions per second for Bitcoin, right? Which is something we've talked about at length in this during our hour together here in on past Tuesdays, and actually there's a proposal to fix that problem, which I'll talk about in just a little bit.
okay.
And
Good.
what do you think about that proposal? Is it a good thing or bad?
The hard fork.
The hard fork is always come with a big question.
Well, are you finished with your number of the week? Okay, let's move on to that topic. I believe that's right here. Thanks, Will. That was good stuff. And this is a good segue into the next story here, which is Gavin Andreessen, who is the chief scientist at the Bitcoin Foundation and one of the very first Bitcoin developers. He actually corresponded with Satoshi Nakamoto from the earliest days, mined some of the earliest Bitcoins. Very smart guy. I don't know what this bird has to do with it, but anyway, that's a picture of him. And like we've discussed in past shows, in fact, Will kind of really made it clear for us a few weeks back that there is a 7 transaction limit based on the block size for Bitcoin. And that is way less than what's currently being serviced by Visa and MasterCard and the like. So it's a problem that needs to be overcome. And we're not quite sure how to do it yet. This is an article about Gavin's proposal to fix that problem. And essentially, it is a major change to the Bitcoin protocol that changes the block size so that it's dynamically growing over time. So that would require, Bitcoin is software, and it's software that is run voluntarily by the entire Bitcoin network. And whenever there is a change to the Bitcoin software, it needs to be adopted by everyone who's participating in the Bitcoin system. So now that there are tens of thousands of computers that are running the Bitcoin software, it becomes very difficult to introduce major changes and get everyone to agree. This is a very controversial topic, and therefore he's suggesting that not every Bitcoin miner will adopt this change, this proposed change to Bitcoin, which would result in a fork in the Bitcoin protocol. And well, that's usually a good thing when there's not money involved, right? Because people who are interested in one can go do their thing one way, and people who are interested in the other thing can go do it in another way. But the question becomes, what are my pre-fork Bitcoins worth in this world versus my pre-fork Bitcoins in this world, right? That becomes the question. I don't know what you think about it, Oscar. I mean, there's a little bit of information here, and Gavin did a blog post that's probably a little bit over my head. Do you have any thoughts on it, or have you talked to some of your?
The hard fork sometimes last time ago in 2010 or 2011 have some problem, and they need to redo everything, and it caused many transactions to be
voided. Yeah.
I don't know, but based on that experience, I don't think it will happen again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we shall see. That would be a very exciting development indeed.
I think personally it will be affecting price when Gavin said will implement it.
There was a coincidental drop in price when he mentioned. Yeah.
I think it will.
Yeah. Well, it's possible. We've always said that Bitcoin is the first incarnation of cryptocurrency, and it has the first mover benefit of a network effect, meaning that part of what Bitcoin is all the people that use it and create the network. Bitcoin is open source software. I can go launch another Bitcoin tomorrow, but it won't be like Bitcoin because nobody's using it, whereas Bitcoin, everyone's using it. So, Bitcoin is a thing unto itself, but there are lots of other altcoins that are trying to solve problems like this 7 transaction limit by making changes. So there are dozens and dozens of what they call altcoins that are Bitcoin competitors, and perhaps it will be one of those altcoins that solves this problem that could somehow usurp Bitcoin in the #1 spot. But I'll just add that that's not likely to happen anytime soon, and Bitcoin is at least 20 times larger than the next nearest Bitcoin in terms of market capitalization. So it's still by far the front runner. But if something were to happen like a fork, and it may cause people to look at other alternatives to Bitcoin that came along later and have more flexibility to make changes because they don't have as many people depending on it. So,
Do you think in this? My name is Christian, by the way.
hey, Christian.
I think in this particular situation, the network is incentivized to upgrade and use the new protocol just by virtue of being able to get more transaction fees. Because if you get more transaction, then you're just going to get more money.
Well, I mean, there's no transaction fees if people lose faith in the currency itself, right? So it's a little bit tricky. I mean, I think the reason Gavin makes a post like this is he's testing the waters to see how much opposition there is. Because really, if Bitcoin's going to work, everyone's got to go along with this change if they implement it. Yeah. So if they implement this change, I mean, really, this is part of the salesmanship of his idea to solve this problem.
Yeah,
right?
And this particular change might, I mean, it might be easier to swallow by the network because it just gives everybody more money in the network. Because you can potentially have more transactions in a block and potentially more transaction fees, commission. So
right.
You're mining, you're putting in the same effort to mine, and you get more money. So hopefully it's an easy sell for the network.
Right. That's a good point.
This might not be so easy to solve it.
Right. I hadn't thought about that, and that's a good point. If there are more transactions per block, then there are more transaction fees. Eventually, we have to move to a world where the entire ecosystem is supported on the transaction fees versus the block reward. Yeah. So maybe they will be convinced to do it.
It would require 100% consensus. Every node would need to switch, right?
Right. But if the value of Bitcoin itself depended on that switch, then you'd probably, once you got to like maybe over 50%, people might just feel the peer pressure to go there. But this is actually one of the things that people complain about Bitcoin is there's too much centralized power and control. And really, this one developer who's really affecting the code base of Bitcoin itself, which is used by millions of people all over the world, millions of computers, him and his opinion is what drives the development updates to Bitcoin. Now he couldn't pull off a total coup, but he can definitely move the consensus of the group more than probably anybody else. And that's a complaint about Bitcoin, that all of that power is in the hands of just a few developers, even though it is an open source development effort. So any questions on that? I thought
it's the opposite. This Bitcoin, the blockchain technology is to decentralize, but actually still centralized.
Right. Yes, that is the complaint. They're like, I thought Bitcoin was decentralized. Now we've got all this centralization of the miners. We've got centralization within the core development group. And those are, whenever you have centralization, you have corruptible points of failure. And, for better or worse, it's just good to know the facts. That's the case when it comes to Bitcoin. So
it is kind of like a representative democracy in that, like, someone says, I want to do this, and they can't, right? They've got to get buy-in from the population.
Right. He's not the dictator. He doesn't really look like one, does he?
It's a meritocracy.
Right? The bird who is the dictator.
Right. Yes. This is Satoshi Nakamoto right here. He's the brain. He's the brains of the operation.
Well, he's got the most merit. Right? Anyone could suggest something. Right? But,
right.
The parent.
So the the fork means it's going to have branches. Is that how you understand it?
Well, the meaning of fork is, let's say that he introduces this change and only half the people upgrade their software, and the other half don't. Then it's a split.
It's like a religion branched out.
Right. Yeah.
So would that create a situation like the web? Some web which was very famous and then slowly replaced by the newcomers, and then the other ones like Netscape.
Yeah. I mean,
Bitcoin can disappear, be replaced by some other.
Right, you're right. I mean, Bitcoin could be MySpace, and the Facebook of cryptocurrency might not be here yet. We don't know.
Okay.
Or it could be like IPv4. We're still all using IP version 4, even though IP version 6 exists, but nobody uses it. Right?
They wouldn't coexist, right? We've had this before. It's like there would then be a fork in the blockchain, and there'd be two versions of blockchain. The old software will go, no, that bigger block is illegal, so I'm going to reject it. I'm going to accept the blocks that are within size. And then the new software will take the bigger blocks, and you've got two versions of the block, and it diverges. And 3 years ago, there was a bug, and not everyone updated, and therefore it split, and we had two versions of the blockchain, and they had to roll back.
Right, that's Oscar made reference to that. Yeah.
That's why people actually very scared of this platform, especially for exchanges.
Yeah. I can imagine you're concerned with this potential problem. Anyway, again, not dull at all. All right, I skipped a little bit ahead. What do I want to talk about next? Let's talk about this, because this is also related. How mainstreaming Bitcoin makes it more like Wall Street. And this is a blog post. It's not very long, but the point that it's making is that the transaction volume is flat. Maybe he was reading the blog post that you cited.
Probably.
But he is making the point that more and more transactions are happening off the blockchain, right? And big organizations like Coinbase and Circle, when they have your Bitcoins, they have your Bitcoin private keys. So you can log into their website and they can show you the number of Bitcoins that are in your account, but they hold the keys to those Bitcoins, and they can show you any number they like, right? This is what happened with Mt. Gox. You know, when I logged into Mt. Gox, it said you have 2 Bitcoins, but if I tried to withdraw, it said there's a problem. You know, we're going through technical difficulties. You can't withdraw your 2 Bitcoins at this time. And it's like, uh-oh, what's going on? You know, and it says I have 2 Bitcoins, but I don't have the keys to those Bitcoins, so really I don't have those Bitcoins. You know, if big organizations like Coinbase and Circle have a lion's share or some significant share of Bitcoins, and people are sending Bitcoins back and forth amongst the Coinbase wallet and within the Circle wallet, then they can actually do their own accounting and not account for those Bitcoin transactions on the blockchain itself, which means it's opaque. People won't see those transactions on the blockchain. They'll merely have a balance at Circle or a balance at Coinbase, and the transactions never hit the blockchain. And that's what's done in modern day banking. When you log into your bank and your bank says you have $100, that's really just a number in an account, and it's based on somebody else's outstanding loan and fractional reserve banking that takes place. And more and more we see that Bitcoin can start to look like the old banking system, right? For better or for worse. Places like Coinbase and Circle help people have an on-ramp and help people get involved, but also they tend to adopt the old mechanisms that people are still used to employing in their financial life, right? The whole reason Bitcoin was invented was that so that you wouldn't have to rely on a third party, and here we are giving the keys to the castle back to centralized places. So it's just something to be aware of. Doing off-chain transactions is another potential solution for that 7 transaction per second problem that we have. Because if large swaths of the transactions can be accounted for off of the blockchain, then it will take longer for us to hit that 7 transaction limit. So
presumably those transactions can happen and not queue up and need to go back into the blockchain. Is that
yeah, those transactions are accounted for with their own software. They never account for those transactions on the blockchain itself. So maybe at some point in time they take 100 transactions, and that means a balance of something, and that's the transaction that hits the blockchain, not the hundreds that they've kept accounted for themselves. But good to know. Good to know. I mean, they provide a valuable service. Maybe people are willing to make that trade-off, but maybe some people don't realize they're making that trade-off. But that's why we're here, to get educated, to understand what's going on. All you have to do is come on Tuesday night and you'll be fine.
We know it's going to be replayed by something else, we just dump it. Just like on the share.
Okay, well let's move on. We beat that to death, so let's talk about something even more scary. This is a posting by Roberto, who is back from Italy, by the way, but he's not able to join us on Tuesday nights because of family obligations, but he's still very much a participant in the local Bitcoin scene here. And he updated his wallet software. He has this Bitcoin app, and the details are in the post, but after he updated his software, he realized that the Bitcoin address that was showing us his main address was not his address. It was another address. And he got very worried that he had some sort of spam version of the app, or that someone, there was a man-in-the-middle attack and someone's placing their own Bitcoin address within the application. And he was very concerned about what was happening with his wallet. It turns out that the developers made a choice to use deterministic addresses, meaning that in order to aid in the anonymity of Bitcoin, that it would display a new Bitcoin address every time for every transaction. So he was actually receiving to a new address every time, but it was all accounted for within the wallet itself. So basically kind of a confusing update for, well, Roberto is quite sophisticated, actually. I mean, it's probably his level of sophistication that allowed him to notice this. Maybe if you were enough of a novice, you wouldn't even realize. He was, he's very sophisticated and immediately noticed that this app was showing an address he wasn't familiar with, and then he's like, what's going on? You can see that he's got an update. Seems to be a feature, not a bug. Yet I panicked. So you can read all about that here. It's just an interesting story. I think it's a good example of the local community here kind of sticking together and sharing information. We're all lots of us are using the same wallets and the same software. Lots of us use the bitcoin.co.id exchange. So we're all kind of hanging together so that we don't hang ourselves separately. And it's a good community we have here in Bali. We help each other out. This is a good example. So thanks for that, Roberto. Next story. Let's see if we got our audio here. This is pretty good. Check this out.
Bitcoin is the most subversive technology on the planet. This is a system that is growing around the entire world. The government, no matter how many guns they draw, cannot change a mathematical problem. They can point their guns at 2 + 2, but it's always going to equal 4.
Welcome to the financial renaissance. Invented in 2009 by a fictitious person named Satoshi Nakamoto.
Over time, I think Satoshi learned to trust me. My last email to him was telling him that I had agreed to go visit the folks at the CIA.
It's the smartest people in the room that are the most excited about this. So what are they seeing?
My involvement in Bitcoin is not politically motivated.
Yeah, dude.
People are realizing large capital gains When we go in, cameras down first until we get to your servers.
Exactly.
Back up.
From craze to crash.
The value of the virtual currency Bitcoin has plunged.
Anybody with experience just made a ton of money. Anybody who was silly about their Bitcoins just lost a ton of money.
Depending on who you speak to, the issuance of our guidance was either the best thing that ever happened to Bitcoin or the worst thing.
Politically, I'm not a very big fan of either the banks or Federal Reserve, and Bitcoin allows me to get around that.
At least 2,000 companies have been subpoenaed by New York's Department of Financial Services.
Regulations cannot keep pace with the pace of innovation.
Explaining Bitcoin to a bank feels like explaining Amazon.com to Barnes & Noble.
Bitcoin currently is the largest social economic experiment ever conducted in the history of the world. I see the democratization of technology as being a really positive thing. The pressure to not screw up just gets bigger and bigger. You can basically put a bank in your pocket. It's pretty amazing.
So that movie's called The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin. And I've mentioned this a few times before, but the first time I ever heard about Bitcoin, I read an article in Wired magazine called The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin. And that was in the fall of 2011. Wow. So obviously, you know, rumors of Bitcoin's demise are grossly over-exaggerated. And I think it's a great title. It looks like a great movie. And I think we're going to try and arrange for a screening of it. In fact, the next thing we've got here is this Bit Film Festival. And these guys have created an entire series of films and packaged it all up so that anybody can put on their own Bitcoin Film Festival. They've got, you know, I don't know, a day's worth of Bitcoin movies to watch. I don't know if anyone listening or in the room is interested in this project. I'd love to see us screen something. Maybe in January or February, we could have our own Bitcoin Film Festival here in Bali. Certainly possible. It's just a matter of someone kind of taking the charge. So if anyone's interested in doing that, or at least discussing the idea, come find me or send me an email. Yes, we could do it at Paradiso. That would be fun. Yeah, maybe we could get more people from around Ubud to figure out what Bitcoin is. That would be a good idea, Davey. You're full of good ideas. All right, next story. Let's see where we are. Okay, this is a good one. I like this one. Big banks are confident in the face of Bitcoin threat. This is an institutional investor. And, well, it's just interesting that the big banks are commenting on Bitcoin at all. There's a really good quote here. Bitcoin developers are going to try and eat our lunch, and that's fine, said Jamie Dimon, chairman CEO of JP Morgan. That's about as big as it gets. He's the king of the universe, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan. And if he's trying to convince a room full of people that he's not afraid of Bitcoin, then I say that means he's afraid of Bitcoin. But yeah. I don't know. That's just me. If he wasn't afraid, he wouldn't mention it at all right? Yeah. So anyway, check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes. And yeah, it's a good read, especially that first little bit. What else do we have here? We already talked about this story, talked about this one. Okay, let's talk about the final segment of the show. Like I mentioned, oh, is Peter trying to send us a question? Can you check the group and see if sure. Peter has got something to add? Okay, guys, so the title of the show tonight is Bitcoin, a Force of Nature. And essentially, you know, there were lots of people had a problem with the way the monetary system works. And there were lots of precursors to Bitcoin itself. But the one thing that they didn't have that Bitcoin does is the decentralization. People would start companies like eGold or Liberty Reserve. There were lots of other efforts. Lots of little localities created their own currencies. And whenever that happens, if the regulators or the governments in a certain jurisdiction, if they have somebody to sue or to send cease and desist, or even show up with guns, then that will happen when it comes to money. If you just look at what has happened over the course of history. And Bitcoin is different because there is no head of the snake. There's nobody to sue. It's a protocol. It's math. It's totally decentralized and voluntary. So arguably, it cannot be stopped. It's like the internet itself, right? You can't sue the internet. It's kind of like email. Email is also a protocol. You can't sue email. You know, and I can send email from me at Yahoo to you at Gmail because it's an agreed upon language. It's really like a language. That's what a protocol is. And arguably, that's why Bitcoin has succeeded. Bitcoin is a fundamentally new technology. It allows a large group of computers that do not know one another to reach a consensus every 10 minutes. That's pretty cool. That's pretty miraculous. It's a force of nature. It's like gravity or time. It just runs on the internet and it cannot be stopped. Question?
Why can't that process of making a decision apply to the change in the blockchain size so that the people who are mining it, the guy puts up, well, this is what we're going to do, and they make a decision, and then we do it.
Right. Well, yeah, the blockchain is consensus about who owns what Bitcoins, at least in its present incarnation. It's not a consensus on the rules of Bitcoin. A consensus on the rules of Bitcoin are arrived at by a group of developers, a small group, some would say, led by Gavin Andreessen, like we discussed earlier. But you've got development protocols like Ethereum that use a blockchain for the development of a computer programming platform, which presumably could use a consensus engine to arrive at the rules of the game. So I don't know enough about Ethereum to comment further on that, but lots of smart people are thinking about this very problem. How do you reach consensus, and how do you propagate consensus amongst a system of computers that don't necessarily trust one another? Right? That's the blockchain technology. Applying the blockchain technology is something that people are still trying to figure out. Right? And we're going to go over several examples, hopefully that will shed some light on the possibilities. But you know, we really don't know all the possibilities. You know, when we first had the World Wide Web, could we conceive of Facebook? Probably not, right? So we still don't know, you know, the genius little kids that are going to spend their whole life in a Bitcoin world are going to invent something really fantastic someday. I can't wait to see, you know, when I'm changing my dentures, maybe I'll stop for a second and try to figure it out, and I'll be in awe, no doubt. But this story is actually not a Bitcoin story. It's a story about permaculture. And essentially, it's by this guy, Charles Eisenstein, who's a great economic thinker. And he's got a lot of controversial ideas, big ideas about how money can work differently. But it's not surprising to me that he's commenting in this instance on permaculture and the decentralization of our food sources. Right now, you've probably got a Monsanto sucks bumper sticker on the back of your car. Monsanto represents centralization in the food world, right? And whenever there is centralization, there is corruptibility. Some people would say that Monsanto has been co-opted by people who prioritize profits over the health of large swaths of the population. And there is a cultural response to that, and that is the decentralization of our food supply. And it's interesting how many permaculture folks show up at Bitcoin meetings, and it's actually not surprising if you think about it, because they're dealing with the same mega trend, and that is the decentralization, the localization, the assuming of responsibility of more aspects of our lives, not relying on some big central authority, but relying on our neighbors and our own intellect to make decisions, right? And this article makes that point, and and says that, you know, we can make our own food and we don't have to listen to all their projections about people starving and trying to feed the number of people on the planet. It's an interesting read. I encourage you to take a look at it. But I'm really using this story as a segue into the fact that there are ways that cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology is entering this world as well. These permacredits are an early attempt at Bitcoin 2.0 technology or other uses for the blockchain. A permacredit is an attempt to make a token that is backed by the capability to create permaculture. So they've created this asset that is good within the community of people that are creating permaculture around the world. So if you've got a permaculture farm, then you can say that you accept permacredits as payment for the things that you produce at your farm. And if you're holding permacredits and this idea takes off, then you've got the advanced economic capability to enhance your permaculture endeavor. So it's a little bit hard to get your head around, but permacredits is an asset that is basically it's a token that is backed by the idea of permaculture, right? And it has an exchange rate to Bitcoin. So you can use Bitcoin to buy permacredits, and then presumably you can turn around and use those permacredits to support a local farm or buy something from a CSA or donate to someone within that community so that you can, because you want to get behind, you want your money to have a little bit of personality. Permacredits is like money with personality. It supports a cause that a lot of people care about, right? And it's an attempt to create a microeconomy that's trying to support this idea of permaculture, right?
It's taking over from the centralized organic labeling of food.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, and it's creating a community that would be self-policing, presumably, or taking a decentralized approach to the problem.
Whereas now, if you want to sell it as organic oranges or something, you have to go through the bureaucracy and a lot of red tape to get that thing on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a topic unto itself, and this is one attempt to solve it. And it's the combination. It's a part of the mega trend, which is decentralization, and then there's also the way that money, or the ways that we use money or account for real world things. I like to say that's what money does, is it counts things in the real world. It's an attempt to apply this technology to something else. So I'll put the link in the show notes. You can read about how it works. If you're interested in this topic, perhaps you can learn more. Another example, and we've mentioned this before on the show, is this LTB coin. The Let's Talk Bitcoin media company. It started off as a podcast, Let's Talk Bitcoin, right? In the early part of 2013, this guy, Adam B. Levine, just started producing a twice weekly Bitcoin podcast. And it has taken off in popularity, and other podcasters have joined him. He's created a little media empire all about Bitcoin, and there's a Bitcoins and Gravy show. There's a Mad Money Machine Bitcoin show. He still produces this show twice a week. So he loves Bitcoin. He loves talking about Bitcoin, but he has no idea how to run a media company. So what does he do? He creates this Let's Talk Bitcoin coin, LTB coin, and he says, I don't want to sell advertising. I don't want to chase people to create content for my media empire. What I'll do is I'll force the advertisers to buy this LTB coin if they want to advertise on my network, and I will pay the media producers with this Let's Talk Bitcoin coin, right? And then there's an exchange rate. There's always an exchange rate between the LTB coin and Bitcoin. So whenever anybody wants to opt out into real money, they can do so. But in the meantime, there's an incentive for people to create content, and there's an incentive for advertisers to pay for that content. And he's created a little ecosystem where he can account for this economy in his own token. So yet, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. And it's starting to work. So anyway, this is another thing to take a look at and something to pay attention to. It's really cutting edge stuff. And it's not just technology, it's culture. You know, it's getting people to think about things in a different way. And it's really fascinating, you know. It's, by the way, all the software that he created to make this work, he is open source, and anybody can do their own version of this software themselves and improve it. So very cool.
Do you know how much for the LTB coin currently?
What the exchange rate is? I don't know. But last time I looked, I mean, it was like one LTB coin was like maybe a 25th of a cent or something like that in US dollars.
Right.
Right. So it's quite small. But the little universe is still quite small as well.
The alternate coin is considered quite high.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting to see how this takes off. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to talk about our last story of the night. Now, a lot of people were excited when Overstock.com decided they were going to accept Bitcoin as payment. Right? Overstock.com is it's kind of like a mini Amazon.com. Essentially, it's kind of like the dollar store on the internet. I think people go there to try and unload like 1,000 toaster ovens that they couldn't move in their retail shop, and so you can get things for a bargain.
That's how I got their start, in fact.
Yeah, maybe they do it, yeah. But you can find good deals there. You can find just about anything to buy, and you can buy it with Bitcoin, and that was big news. I think at the time it was the biggest retailer to announce that they accept Bitcoin. And this guy, Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com, has become quite an advocate of Bitcoin. In fact, he spoke at the last global conference in Amsterdam. It's actually a very interesting talk. It has very little to do with Bitcoin, actually, more to do with his battles on Wall Street with, you know, running a public company, right? And doing battle. He's got war stories. He also invokes all of this philosophy, ancient philosophy. He's very well read. I think he's got several Ivy League degrees, and he's got quite a pedigree, this guy. And his keynote from the last Global Bitcoin Conference is quite interesting to listen to. But this is the latest news from Overstock.com that they've hired coders from Counterparty, which is a company that actually facilitates creating crypto assets. So he's taken some developers from the Counterparty organization, and he's building his own stock market. So he's saying if you can decentralize money itself, then you can decentralize the idea of taking a company public. So by creating your own stock in cryptocurrency. And that's essentially what he's endeavoring to do, is create a way for him to create assets that are backed by a company, which is essentially what a share in a company is. But instead of it, you know, you having to hire some big 5 accounting firm, some big lawyer house, and some big investment bank to take your company public, you can just do so based on a set of rules and some software. And that's what he's endeavoring to do with his latest. He's basically gone public with this idea, and he's got developers and also lawyers and lobbyists, because he's planning on working within the regulatory framework of Wall Street. In fact, he's trying to get what this story goes on to say is that he's trying to get his initial framework up so that he can present it to regulators and play nice. So highly encourage you to take a look at that. It's yet another example of what's possible with this blockchain technology. Besides money, there's other things to do. And I'll put the link in the show notes, and you can take a look at it and maybe comment within the group. So that's all the time we have. I just want to mention again that this Saturday we're going to have this Bitcoin 101 in Bahasa, Indonesia. If you know any locals and if there's any interest at all in Bitcoin, I hope you'll send them our way. They can register at this Bitcoins in Bali /Bitcoin 101-INA. The lovely Vinny will be teaching that class on Saturday, this Saturday at 10 a.m. at Ubud. And stay tuned to Bitcoins in Bali on Facebook. We'll talk more about this startup weekend and the Bali Bitcoin binge, where we're going to take over this villa and create some very cool projects in a 30-day time span. That begins November 14th through December 14th. That's all the time we have. Join us next week. We do this every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock in Bali. If you happen to be in Bali, come join us in person in downtown Ubud at the Ubud co-working space. That's all the time we have. Thanks for coming, guys. All right.